My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and at 36 years old, I discovered that blood isn't always thicker than water. 2 weeks ago, I stood in my parents' lavish living room, shaking with rage as I emptied the contents of their safe onto the marble floor: stock certificates, property deeds, and a folder marked inheritance planning. The betrayal burned in my chest as I thought of my daughter Emma lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life while they'd refused to help her. Little did they know that this moment would completely shatter our family forever. Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on today's story. Before we dive deeper into how my world turned upside down, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. This family revenge drama gets pretty intense, so if you're ready for some serious betrayal and justice, hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, what happened next shocked even me, and I lived through it. Now, let's rewind to where this nightmare began. For all my life, I believed I had the perfect family. My parents, Richard and Helen Mitchell, were pillars of our community in Westchester County, New York. Dad built his fortune in real estate development, while Mom managed their social calendar with military precision. I grew up in a sprawling colonial home with manicured gardens and a swimming pool that hosted the neighborhood's most envied summer parties. From the outside, we were the American dream incarnate. When I married David at 25, my parents spared no expense. The wedding cost nearly $200,000, a lavish affair at the Plaza Hotel with 500 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and a honeymoon in the Maldives that they insisted on funding. Nothing but the best for our princess, Dad would say, beaming with pride as he wrote checks without hesitation. The event made the society pages, and Mom kept framed copies in their foyer. My relationship with my parents had always been one of admiration and obedience. Growing up, I was the perfect daughter, straight A's, captain of the debate team, accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship that my father insisted I decline because Mitchells don't accept handouts. I followed their blueprint for success without question, even choosing to major in business rather than my passion for literature. After college, I joined my father's company as he expected, working my way up from assistant to director of operations. David worked there too. That's how we met, managing the financial division. We were the corporate power couple my parents had always envisioned for me. When we announced our pregnancy 3 years into our marriage, my parents seemed pleased, if somewhat reserved. Children are wonderful, but don't let motherhood derail your career trajectory, Mom advised. Emma was born beautiful and healthy, with David's brown eyes and my red hair. My parents doted on her in their own way. Expensive gifts, a college fund established at birth, and professional photographers hired for every milestone. But there was always a distance, a formality to their grandparenting that I couldn't quite understand. They'd hold Emma briefly during visits but were quick to hand her back when she fussed. Life proceeded according to plan until Emma's 4th birthday, when she began complaining of headaches and fatigue. At first, we attributed it to preschool exhaustion or minor viruses. But when she collapsed during her ballet recital, our world began to crumble. The diagnosis came like a wrecking ball: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, an aggressive form that would require immediate and intensive treatment. David and I were devastated but determined. We converted our home office into a cheerful bedroom for Emma, adjusted our work schedules, and prepared for the battle ahead. The medical bills mounted quickly, but we had good insurance and savings. What we didn't anticipate was that the specialized treatment Emma needed, a revolutionary immunotherapy only available at a clinic in Boston, wouldn't be covered by our policy. The cost, $175,000 upfront. We exhausted our savings and investments. We took out a second mortgage. We launched a GoFundMe campaign that brought in $30,000 from friends and colleagues. Still, we were short by almost $100,000, and time was running out. Emma's condition was deteriorating rapidly. That's when I made what seemed like the most obvious decision in the world. I called my parents for help. "Dad, we need to talk about Emma," I said over dinner at their house one Sunday evening, while David stayed home with our daughter. The treatment she needs isn't covered by insurance, and we're running out of options. The silence that followed my explanation stretched uncomfortably long. My father sipped his whiskey, while my mother adjusted her napkin repeatedly. "That's a substantial amount," Dad finally said, his voice businesslike. "Have you explored all other financing options? Medical loans? Clinical trials?" I stared at him in disbelief. "This isn't a business proposal, Dad. This is Emma's life we're talking about." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand with manicured fingers. "Darling, you know we love Emma, but this is a complicated situation. That treatment sounds experimental, and sometimes these miracle cures are just ways for hospitals to exploit desperate parents." I pulled my hand away as if burned. "It's not experimental. It's FDA approved and has an 83% success rate for cases like Emma's. Her oncologist has been trying to get us in for months, but we can't proceed without the payment." Dad cleared his throat, straightening his silverware with precision. "Rebecca, your mother and I have always taught you self-reliance. You and David have good jobs. Perhaps you should consider downsizing your home or selling some assets." "We've already done that," I said, my voice rising. "We've liquidated everything we can. David's working double shifts. I've taken out loans against my retirement. We're still short." "Well," my mother interjected, dabbing her lips with her napkin, "there's always the option of traditional treatment. Surely your insurance covers chemotherapy." The casual dismissal of Emma's best chance at survival felt like a physical blow. "The standard protocol hasn't been effective. Her cancer is aggressive and resistant to conventional treatments. This immunotherapy is her best hope, her only hope according to her doctors." My father stood up and walked to the liquor cabinet, refilling his glass. "Rebecca, you're being emotional, which is understandable given the circumstances. But throwing money at unproven treatments won't necessarily save Emma. Sometimes we have to accept the natural course of events." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The natural course? "She's 5 years old, Dad. There's nothing natural about a child dying when there's treatment available." "Lower your voice," my mother hissed. "The neighbors will hear." That's when something inside me snapped. "The neighbors? You're worried about what the neighbors might think while your granddaughter is fighting for her life?" Dad sighed heavily. "We've already committed to funding the new pediatric wing at Mercy Hospital. It's a 7-figure donation, contracts signed. Our charitable giving for the year is allocated." "A pediatric wing that Emma might not live to see," I said bitterly. "That wing will help thousands of children," my mother countered. "We have to think of the greater good." I stood up, my dinner untouched. "What about the greater good of your own family? Your own blood?" "Rebecca," my father said sternly, "you're being unfair. We've always been generous with you. The wedding alone." "The wedding?" I laughed incredulously. "You're comparing my wedding to my daughter's life?" "That's not what I meant," he backpedaled. "I'm simply pointing out that we've never hesitated to support you when it aligned with responsible decisions." "Responsible?" My voice cracked. "What's more responsible than saving your child's life?" My mother stood and smoothed her dress. "Perhaps if you had focused more on your career instead of rushing into motherhood, you'd be in a better financial position now." The room seemed to tilt. "Did you just suggest that having Emma was irresponsible?" "Helen," my father warned, but she continued. "You had such promise, Rebecca. Executive track. You could have been CFO by now if you hadn't cut back your hours after she was born." I grabbed my purse, hands shaking. "I'm leaving before I say something I'll regret. But know this, I will never forget this conversation. Never." As I drove home that night, tears blurring my vision, I couldn't reconcile the parents who had spent $200,000 on a single day of celebration with the same people who refused to help save their granddaughter. It was as if I'd glimpsed behind a curtain and discovered strangers where my family should have been. David was waiting up, hope in his exhausted eyes. When I shook my head, he collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. "What are we going to do, Becca?" I didn't have an answer. But as I checked on Emma, peacefully sleeping despite the tubes and monitors, I made a silent promise. I would find a way to save her, no matter what it took. What I didn't realize then was how that promise would lead me down a path I never imagined possible, a path that would reveal family secrets darker than I could have ever imagined. The days following my parents' rejection were a blur of hospital visits, phone calls with insurance representatives, and sleepless nights researching alternative funding options. Emma's condition continued to deteriorate. The dark circles under her eyes deepened, and her once vibrant red curls, just like mine, had thinned dramatically from the conventional treatments that weren't working. "Mommy, when will I feel better?" she asked one afternoon as I read her favorite story about a brave princess who fought dragons. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter was fighting a monster far more terrifying than any fairy tale villain. "Soon, sweetheart," I promised, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Mommy and Daddy are working on a special medicine that's going to make you strong again." But privately, David and I were running out of options. We'd been rejected for additional medical loans due to our already stretched finances. Our fundraiser had plateaued. David had approached his estranged parents, retired teachers with modest savings, who contributed their entire emergency fund of $15,000, still leaving us catastrophically short. "There has to be another way," I said one night after Emma had finally fallen asleep. We were sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills and loan rejection letters. David looked up, his face haggard with exhaustion. "I've been thinking, your parents safe." "What about it?" "You know the combination, right? From when you used to water their plants when they traveled?" I stared at him, understanding slowly dawning. "David, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" He ran his hands through his hair. "They have more money than they could spend in 3 lifetimes, Becca. They have stock certificates, bearer bonds, liquid assets we could convert quickly." "You're talking about stealing from my parents." "I'm talking about saving our daughter's life with money they won't even miss," he countered. "Money they've explicitly refused to use to save their own granddaughter. Is it really stealing when it's family? When it's life or death?" The moral implications swirled in my mind. They would press charges. They'd never forgive us. "And could you forgive yourself if we lost Emma knowing there was something we could have done?" His voice broke on our daughter's name. I sat in silence, the grandfather clock in our hallway, a wedding gift from my parents, ticking loudly in the quiet house. "Let me try one more thing," I finally said. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my childhood home. I knew my parents' schedule by heart. Wednesday was their standing golf game followed by lunch at the country club. The house would be empty until at least 3 o'clock. The housekeeper, Maria, had known me since childhood and barely blinked when I let myself in, explaining I needed to pick up some family photo albums for a project with Emma. "How is the little angel?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "Fighting," I said simply. "She's very brave." "I light candles for her every Sunday," Maria said, squeezing my hand. "God will not take such a sweet child." I smiled gratefully, guilt gnawing at me for what I was about to do. "Maria, I'll be in my father's study for a while. I need to find some specific baby pictures." "Take your time, Miss Rebecca. I'll be cleaning the guest rooms upstairs." Once alone in my father's wood-paneled sanctuary, I moved quickly to the painting behind his desk, a maritime scene that concealed the wall safe. The combination was my mother's birthday. She'd insisted on it, claiming my father would never forget it that way. The irony wasn't lost on me as I dialed the numbers with trembling fingers. But when the safe door swung open, I froze. Instead of the stock certificates and bonds I expected, I found several folders labeled with names I didn't recognize. Curiosity overtook caution, and I pulled them out, spreading them on my father's desk. The first contained loan agreements, predatory terms for business owners in financial distress. Interest rates that were technically legal but morally unconscionable. The second held foreclosure notices on properties my father had acquired at fractions of their value by manipulating zoning laws and calling in political favors. The third folder stopped my heart. It was labeled Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, Private Holdings. My father had always claimed his business interests were solely in real estate, but here was evidence of a significant investment in a pharmaceutical company. As I flipped through the documents, one paper made me gasp audibly, a confidential memo outlining price increases on several cancer medications, including one of the very drugs Emma was taking. The memo coldly calculated how much they could raise prices before insurance companies would balk, not considering the impact on patients who needed these medications to survive. My father was profiting from the same disease that was killing his granddaughter. And based on the quarterly dividend statements, he was profiting handsomely. But the fourth folder was what truly shattered my world. Inside was a DNA test and a legal agreement dated 1 year before my birth. The test clearly showed that Richard Mitchell was not my biological father. The agreement was between my mother and a man named Thomas Caldwell, a financial settlement in exchange for terminating all parental rights and maintaining complete confidentiality. I sat back in my father's leather chair, my worldview collapsing around me. The man who had raised me, who had just refused to save his granddaughter, wasn't even my biological father. Had he always known? Was that why he could so callously refuse to help Emma, because he didn't see her as his true blood? As the shock subsided, a cold clarity took its place. I carefully photographed every document with my phone, then placed all the folders back exactly as I'd found them, all except one. The Mitchell Pharmaceuticals folder I tucked into my bag. Then I closed the safe, straightened the painting, and left the study. I thanked Maria on my way out, the weight of what I'd discovered heavy on my shoulders. As I drove home, a plan began to form, one that would not only save Emma but would deliver a reckoning that my parents never saw coming. 3 days after discovering the contents of my father's safe, I sat in a coffee shop across from Jessica Chen, an investigative reporter for the New York Tribune. I'd selected her carefully, known for her exposés on corporate corruption. She had recently published a series on pharmaceutical price gouging that had led to congressional hearings. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "Everything I mentioned in my email is here. Documents, photos, financial records. It's all authenticated and dated." Jessica picked up the drive, her expression professionally neutral. "And you're willing to go on record? Using your real name?" I nodded. "My daughter's life depends on this story breaking quickly. I have nothing left to lose." "And you understand the potential legal repercussions?" "Your father." "He's not my father," I corrected her. "As those DNA results show. But yes, I understand the risks. I'm prepared to face them." Jessica tucked the drive into her bag. "I'll need to verify everything independently. If it checks out, we can run the story as early as Monday." "Emma doesn't have much time," I said, my voice steady despite the panic constantly thrumming beneath my skin. "The treatment window is closing." "I'll do my best," she promised. "If these documents are legitimate, this isn't just a family drama, it's criminal activity. Price fixing, insider trading, potential SEC violations." I reached for my coffee, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. Was I really doing this? Destroying the family that had raised me, even if they had betrayed me in the most fundamental way? The image of Emma in her hospital bed flashed before my eyes, answering my doubt. Yes, I was really doing this. For her, I would burn every bridge, cross every line. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my purse for the final piece of leverage, a recording of my last conversation with my parents about Emma's treatment. Their callous refusal, their prioritization of their public image over their granddaughter's life, all captured clearly on my phone. This is just for context, to understand their character. I don't expect you to use it in your reporting. Jessica listened to a portion of the recording, her professional facade cracking slightly as she heard my mother's dismissive tone when discussing Emma's chances. Mrs. Mitchell, I have to ask, have you considered going public with this story yourself? Social media? It might generate enough attention to fund your daughter's treatment directly. I shook my head. I considered it, but this isn't just about Emma anymore. How many other families have been devastated by the price gouging my FA, by what Richard Mitchell's company has enabled? How many other children have been denied treatment because of corporate greed? This needs to be systemic change, not just a one-time fundraising miracle. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The wheels were in motion. There would be no turning back now. That evening, I received a text from Jessica, documents verified. Story fast-tracked. Running Sunday online, Monday print. Editor calling it biggest pharma scandal since Martin Shkreli. I showed the message to David, who pulled me into a fierce hug. You did it, Becca. You're saving our girl. We're not there yet, I cautioned. The story still has to break, and we need the treatment approval immediately afterward. But we have leverage now, he said, his eyes lighting up with the first real hope I'd seen in months. Your parents will have no choice but to help Emma to save their own reputations. I wasn't so sure. I'd seen the coldness in my mother's eyes when she suggested Emma's treatment was a waste of resources. I'd heard my father prioritize a hospital wing bearing his name over his granddaughter's life. Their public image was important to them, but was it important enough? I spent that night by Emma's bedside in the hospital. Her condition had worsened, requiring overnight monitoring. As I watched her chest rise and fall with each labored breath, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Not morally, I had no doubts there, but tactically. What if exposing my parents drove them to retaliate rather than capitulate? What are you thinking about, Mommy? Emma's small voice startled me from my thoughts. Her eyes, though sunken with illness, still held that spark of curiosity that had always defined her. Just grown-up stuff, sweetie, I said, smoothing her thin hair. How are you feeling? Tired. But I had a good dream. She smiled weakly. I was swimming in the ocean, and I could breathe underwater like a mermaid. No tubes or needles. I swallowed hard. That sounds like a wonderful dream. When I get better, can we go to the real ocean? Absolutely, I promised. As soon as you're stronger, we'll go wherever you want. She drifted back to sleep, her small hand clutching mine. I made another silent vow, this would not be an empty promise. She would see the ocean. She would grow up. She would have the life she deserved. Wow, I can feel your emotions building as we reach this pivotal moment in the story. My daughter's life is hanging in the balance, and I've just set in motion something that could either save her or destroy what's left of my family. Before we continue to the explosive aftermath of the news story, I'd love to know what you would do in my situation. Would you expose family secrets to save your child? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If you're finding this family drama as intense as I did living through it, please hit that like button and subscribe, it really helps the channel, and you won't want to miss what happens next when the article goes public and my parents realize exactly what I've done. Now, let's see how this all unfolds. Sunday morning arrived with a ping from my phone, a link from Jessica with a simple message, "It's live." The headline of the New York Tribune's website blazed across my screen, Mitchell Pharma Scandal, Real Estate Mogul's Secret Pharmaceutical Empire Exposed for Price Gouging Cancer Medications. The sub-headline was even more damning. Whistleblower Rebecca Mitchell reveals father's company inflated prices of life-saving drugs while refusing to fund granddaughter's cancer treatment. I read the article with a surreal detachment, as if it were describing strangers rather than my own family. Jessica had done thorough work, verifying my documents against public records and finding additional sources who corroborated the predatory business practices. She'd included quotes from former employees of Mitchell Pharmaceuticals who spoke of a corporate culture that prioritized profit over patient access. The article detailed how the company had systematically acquired patents for essential medications and then raised prices by up to 1,000%, all while obscuring their ownership structure through a web of shell companies. My own quotes were measured but devastating. I discovered that the same man who refused to help fund his granddaughter's cancer treatment was profiting from the inflated prices of the very medications she needed to survive. The hypocrisy was unbearable. I hadn't authorized Jessica to include the recording of my conversation with my parents, but she had quoted it selectively. "We've already committed to funding the new pediatric wing at Mercy Hospital. Our charitable giving for the year is allocated," Richard Mitchell had said when asked to help save his 5-year-old granddaughter. By mid-morning, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press and was spreading across national news outlets. My phone began buzzing incessantly with calls and texts, colleagues from work, friends, even distant relatives expressing shock and offering support. The call I was waiting for came just after noon. My father's name flashed on my screen, and I steeled myself before answering. "How dare you?" His voice was ice cold. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I replied, surprised by the calmness in my voice. "I've exposed the truth. You've destroyed decades of business relationships. Our stock is in freefall. The board is calling for my resignation. All because you couldn't respect our decision about Emma's treatment. Your decision to let her die while you profited from the same disease killing her? That decision? It wasn't like that," he sputtered. "The pharmaceutical division is completely separate from my personal finances. Corporate structure, tax implications. Save it," I cut him off. "I don't care about your justifications. What I care about is Emma. She needs that treatment, and she needs it now. And you think publicly humiliating us was the way to secure our help? This tantrum has cost us millions already." "I'm not asking for your help anymore," I said coldly. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a demand. Transfer $200,000 to Emma's treatment fund by the end of the day, or tomorrow's follow-up story will include the DNA test showing you're not my biological father, along with the settlement you paid to keep my real father out of the picture." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "You wouldn't dare." "I already have. Jessica has the documents. She's waiting for my green light to publish part 2 of the exposé." "Your choice, Richard. You ungrateful." "End of day," I repeated, and hung up. David had been listening to the exchange, his face a mixture of awe and concern. "Do you think he'll do it?" "He doesn't have a choice," I said. "His reputation is the only thing he truly values. He can afford to lose $200,000. He can't afford to lose his standing in the community." My mother called next, her voice trembling with rage. "We raised you better than this, Rebecca. After everything we've given you. You raised me to believe that family comes first," I countered. "That's exactly what I'm doing. Putting my family, my daughter, first. By betraying us? By airing our private business to the world? By doing whatever it takes to save Emma. Something you and Dad were unwilling to do." She made a choked sound. "Richard is not your father. Is that what this is about? You found the test?" The confirmation still hurt, even though I'd seen the evidence. "No, Mother. This is about Emma. The fact that you're more worried about that secret coming out than about her dying tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. The money will be transferred, she said stiffly. But don't think this changes anything. You're no longer welcome in this family. I laughed bitterly. Was I ever truly part of it? After she hung up, I checked the fundraising page we'd set up for Emma. Within hours of the article breaking, donations had started pouring in, not just from friends and family, but from strangers moved by our story. By late afternoon, the total had reached $60,000. At 4:56 p.m., I received an email notification of a wire transfer, $200,000 from Mitchell Holdings to the Emma Mitchell Medical Fund. No message, no conditions. Just the money. I called Emma's oncologist immediately. We have the funds, I said, my voice breaking. Can we still get her into the program? I'll make the calls right now, he promised. With the payment secured, we should be able to start treatment within days. As I shared the news with David, we embraced, sobbing with relief. Emma would get her chance. Against all odds, against the coldness of the family I'd thought would always protect us, we'd found a way. What I didn't realize then was that the wire transfer was just the beginning. The reckoning I'd set in motion was far from over, and the fallout would reach further than I could have possibly imagined. That evening, as Emma slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, I received a text from an unknown number. Thank you for your courage. I'm one of many Mitchell Pharma victims. We've been gathering evidence for years. Your article was the breakthrough we needed. Class action lawsuit being filed tomorrow. Would you consider joining? I stared at the message, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This wasn't even just about my parents. This was about a system that valued profit over human lives, that allowed the wealthy and powerful to exploit the vulnerable without consequence. Yes, I texted back. I'll join. The week following the article's publication was a whirlwind. Emma was admitted to the Boston clinic and began the immunotherapy treatment immediately. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, noting that while her condition was advanced, she was otherwise healthy and responding well to the initial protocol. Meanwhile, the Mitchell pharmaceutical scandal exploded into a national news story. Federal regulators announced an investigation into price fixing and anti-competitive practices. The company's stock plummeted by 60% in 3 days. Class action lawsuits were filed on behalf of patients who had been unable to afford their medications after the price hikes. Richard Mitchell was forced to resign as CEO of both his real estate company and the pharmaceutical division. Photos of him leaving his office building, stone-faced and flanked by lawyers, became front-page news. My mother canceled their annual charity gala, citing family health concerns, a transparent attempt to garner sympathy that was met with public skepticism. I received daily updates from Jessica as the story continued to unfold. Former employees came forward with internal documents showing that the company had deliberately suppressed research into more affordable treatment options when they threatened to compete with more profitable drugs. Government investigators discovered offshore accounts where millions in pharmaceutical profits had been hidden from tax authorities. The scandal extended beyond my parents to implicate several prominent figures in their social circle: doctors who had accepted kickbacks for prescribing certain medications, politicians who had blocked regulation in exchange for campaign contributions, charity board members who had looked the other way while serving their own financial interests. It was as if I'd pulled a single thread and watched an entire tapestry of corruption unravel. Through it all, I remained by Emma's side in Boston, insulated from the media frenzy by the clinic's strict privacy policies. David split his time between the hospital and our home, where he was packing up essential items. We'd decided to rent an apartment near the clinic for the duration of Emma's treatment, which would take at least 6 months. Your father's attorney called again, David told me during one of his visits. They want to discuss a settlement. I'm not interested, I said, watching Emma sleep. She was still pale and thin, but the dark circles under her eyes had begun to fade. This was never about money for us. I know, he said, squeezing my hand. But the class action attorneys think having you on board strengthens their case significantly. Your testimony could help thousands of other families affected by the price gouging. I sighed, torn between my desire to put the whole nightmare behind us and my responsibility to the bigger cause. I'll think about it. Later that evening, as I was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Rebecca Mitchell? The voice was deep, with a slight southern accent. Yes? My name is Thomas Caldwell. I believe you recently discovered that I'm your biological father. I nearly dropped my coffee. How did you find me? The news coverage, he said simply. When I saw your name and your age, I knew. Your mother's settlement required my silence, but it didn't prohibit me from following your life from a distance. I recognized you immediately. I sat down, my legs suddenly unsteady. Did you know about Emma? About her condition? Not until the article broke, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I would have helped if I'd known. I've spent 36 years respecting your mother's wishes to stay out of your life, but I can't stand by while my granddaughter suffers. It's too late, I said, unsure whether to feel angry or grateful for this stranger's concern. We've secured the treatment funding. I know. I've been following the news. That's not why I'm calling. He paused. I'd like to meet you, if you're willing. And Emma, when she's stronger. I have a family, your half-siblings would like to know you. The idea of having siblings, a whole branch of family I'd never known, was overwhelming. I need time to process this, I said honestly. Emma's treatment is my priority right now. Of course, he said. I've waited 36 years. I can wait a bit longer. But Rebecca? I want you to know that I fought to be in your life. The settlement wasn't my idea. I wanted to be your father. After we hung up, I sat in the cafeteria for a long time, trying to absorb the implications of this new reality. I had a biological father who had wanted me. I had siblings. I had family beyond the cold, transactional relationship that had defined my childhood. When I returned to Emma's room, I found David speaking with Dr. Patel, Emma's oncologist. The initial results are promising, Dr. Patel was saying. The cancer cells are already showing significant reduction in her blood work. It's early, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Relief washed over me. So the treatment is working? It appears to be, she confirmed. Emma's a fighter. And we caught this just in time. Just in time. If we'd waited for my parents to change their minds, if I hadn't taken drastic action, we might have lost her. The thought made me shudder. That night, after David left to drive back home for more of our things, I received an unexpected visitor. Maria, my parents' longtime housekeeper, appeared at Emma's door with a small suitcase. Miss Rebecca, she said, her eyes darting nervously around the hospital room. I hope you don't mind my coming. Of course not, I said, surprised. How did you find us? Your husband told me when he came to collect your things. She approached Emma's bed cautiously, making the sign of the cross when she saw the 4 lines and monitors. How is she doing? Better, I said. The new treatment is working. Maria nodded, tears in her eyes. I am so glad. She is a special child. She hesitated, then handed me an envelope. This is why I came. I found these when I was cleaning Mr. Mitchell's study after everything happened. Inside the envelope were more documents, emails between my father and the CEO of another pharmaceutical company, discussing ways to prevent the very treatment Emma was now receiving from gaining wider approval. They had been actively working to suppress a therapy that could save children's lives, all to protect their market share of traditional chemotherapy drugs. He printed these, Maria explained. Left them on his desk before they went to their house in the Hamptons. I thought you should have them. I stared at the emails, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me. These weren't just business decisions, they were deliberate actions to block life-saving treatments from reaching children like Emma. Thank you, Maria, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This could help a lot of families. She squeezed my hand. I worked for them for 20 years. I thought I knew them. She glanced at Emma. Some things are more important than loyalty to bad people. As Maria left, I forwarded scans of the documents to Jessica and the class action attorneys. This evidence wouldn't just strengthen our case, it would demolish any remaining defense my parents might try to mount. 6 months later, I stood on a beach in Florida, watching Emma build a sandcastle with her cousins, my half-brother's children. Her hair had grown back, thicker and more vibrant than before. The immunotherapy had worked better than even the doctors had expected, and last month we'd received the news we'd been praying for: Emma was in complete remission. Thomas Caldwell, my biological father, approached with 2 ice cream cones. Thought you might need a break from the sun, he said, handing me one. Thanks, Dad, I replied, the word still feeling new on my tongue but increasingly natural with each passing week. After Emma stabilized, I had finally agreed to meet Thomas. What I discovered was a kind, thoughtful man who had never stopped wondering about the daughter he'd been forced to give up. A successful architect in Charleston, he had raised 3 children with his wife of 30 years. They had welcomed Emma, David, and me into their lives with an openness that stood in stark contrast to the conditional love I'd grown up with. Any word on the settlement? Thomas asked, nodding toward my phone, which I'd been checking compulsively all morning. Still waiting, I said. The judge is expected to rule today. The class action lawsuit against Mitchell Pharmaceuticals had grown to include over 10,000 plaintiffs, patients who had been forced into bankruptcy, who had rationed medications, who had suffered needlessly because of corporate greed. The evidence I'd provided, along with Maria's documents and testimony from former employees, had created an airtight case. My parents had retreated from public life entirely. They'd sold their Westchester home and moved permanently to their house in the Hamptons, where they reportedly didn't answer the door or respond to calls from former friends. Their social circle had disintegrated as the full extent of their involvement in the pharmaceutical scandal became known. The irony wasn't lost on me, they had refused to help Emma because they feared it would impact their lifestyle, and now they'd lost everything anyway. Their reputation, their standing in the community, their business empire, all destroyed by their own choices. My phone rang just as Emma came running up from the water's edge. Mommy! Look what I found. She held up a perfect sand dollar, her face glowing with health and excitement. I smiled at her as I answered the call. This is Rebecca. It was our attorney. The judge has approved the settlement. $1.2 billion to be distributed among the plaintiffs, with additional funds set aside for ongoing medical care for the most severely affected patients. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. And the stipulation about the treatment program? Approved as well. Mitchell Pharmaceuticals will be required to make the immunotherapy treatment that saved Emma available at cost to any child who needs it, regardless of insurance coverage. They're also required to fund research into more affordable alternatives for their entire drug catalog. After thanking him and ending the call, I knelt down to Emma's level. That was some very good news, sweetheart. Remember how we talked about helping other kids who were sick like you were? She nodded solemnly. So they can get the special medicine too? That's right. And now they can, because of what we did. She beamed, then ran back to her sandcastle project, the simple joy of a healthy child on a sunny beach. David joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. Good news? The best, I confirmed, leaning into his embrace. It's finally over. That evening, as our extended family gathered for dinner on the deck of Thomas's beach house, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. In trying to save Emma, I had lost the family I thought was mine, only to discover a truer one waiting to be found. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I immediately recognized the formal, stilted language. Rebecca, your mother, and I would like to see Emma. We understand if you refuse, but we hope you'll consider allowing us some role in her life. Please contact our attorney if you're amenable to discussing arrangements. I showed the message to David, who frowned. After everything they did? They don't deserve to know her. I know, I said. But Emma deserves to know her whole story someday. When she's old enough to understand. What are you going to do? I looked across the table at my daughter, laughing with her newfound family, healthy and whole and full of possibilities. Nothing right now. They can wait. We've earned this happiness. As the sun set over the ocean, I thought about the strange path that had led us here. My parents had spent $200,000 on a wedding to showcase their success to the world, but they had refused to spend the same amount to save their granddaughter's life. In trying to preserve their image, they had lost everything that truly mattered: family, reputation, legacy. And I had become something I never expected, not just a mother who would do anything to save her child, but a whistleblower who helped thousands of others like her. In fighting for Emma, I had found a strength and purpose I never knew I possessed. I had become my parents' worst nightmare, someone who valued truth over appearances, justice over wealth, and family over status. And in doing so, I had found a peace that all their money could never buy. Thomas raised his glass in a toast. To family, the one we choose and the one that chooses us. As glasses clinked around the table, Emma tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, are you happy now? I gathered her into a tight hug, breathing in the scent of sunscreen and sea salt in her hair. Yes, sweetheart. Happier than I've ever been. And it was true. In losing what I thought was my family, I had found something far more precious. The truth of who I was and what I was capable of. For Emma, for the thousands of others affected by corporate greed, and for myself, I had become their reckoning, their justice, their champion. Thank you all so much for staying with me through this incredible journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more family stories with unexpected twists. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. We all face moments that test our values. What would you have done in my situation? Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes standing up for what's right, even against your own family, is the most important thing you can do. Follow me for more stories about family karma, justice, and the lessons I've learned along the way. Until next time, remember that true family is defined by love and support, not by blood or obligation.